What is the role of a difficult childhood in the lives of great men and women, great minds? Is it a requirement? Is it a catalyst? Or is it just a simple coincidence of fate?
Well, it's not a requirement. There's some people with happy childhoods who do quite well. But it certainly is true that a lot of really driven people are driven because they're harnessing the demons of their childhood. Even Barack Obama's sentence in his memoirs, which is, I think every successful man is either trying to live up to the expectations of his father or live down the sins of his father. And for Elon, it's especially true because he had both a violent and difficult childhood and a very psychologically problematic father. He's got those demons dancing around in his head. And by harnessing them, it's part of the reason that he does riskier, more adventurous, wilder things than maybe I would ever do.
You've written that Elon talked about his father and that at times it felt like mental torture, the interaction with him during his childhood. Can you describe some of the things you've learned?
Yeah, well, Elon and Kimball would tell me that, for example, when Elon got bullied on the playground and one day was pushed down some concrete steps and had his face pummeled so badly that Kimball said, I couldn't really recognize him. And he was in the hospital for almost a week. But when he came home, Elon had to stand in front of his father, and his father berated him for more than an hour and said he was stupid and took the side of the person who had beaten him.
That's probably one of the more traumatic events of Elon's life.
Yes, and there's also Veld School, which is a sort of paramilitary camp that young South African boys got sent to. And at one point, he was scrawny. He has very bad at picking up social cues and emotional cues. He talks about being Asperger's. And so he gets traumatized at a camp like that. But the second time he went, he'd gotten bigger. He had shot up to almost 6 feet and he'd learned a little bit of judo. And he realized that if he was getting beaten up, it might hurt him, but he would just punch the person in the nose as hard as possible. So that sense of always punching back has also been ingrained in Elon. I spent a lot of time talking to Errol Musk, his father. Elon doesn't talk to Errol Musk anymore, his father, nor does Kimball. It's been years. And Errol doesn't even have Elon's email. So a lot of times Errol will be sending me emails. And Errol had one of those Jekyll and Hyde personalities. He was, a great mind of engineering and especially material science. Knew how to build a wilderness camp in South Africa using mica and how it would not conduct the heat. But he also would go into these dark periods in which he would just be psychologically abusive. And of course, May Musk says to me, his mother, who divorced Errol early on, said the danger for Elon is that he becomes his father. And every now and then, you've been with him so much, Lex, and you know him well, he'll even talk to you about the demons, about Diablo dancing in his head. I mean, he gets it. He's self-aware. But you've probably seen him at times where those demons take over and he goes really dark and really quiet. And Grimes says, I can tell a minute or two in advance when demon mode's about to happen. And he'll go a bit dark. I was, here at Austin once at dinner with a group. And you could tell suddenly something had triggered him and he was going to go dark. I've watched it at meetings where somebody will say, we can't make that part for less than $200, or no, that's wrong. And he'll berate them. And then he snaps out of it. As you know that too, the huge snap out where suddenly he's showing you a Monty Python skit on his phone and he's joking about things. So I think coming out of the childhood, there were just many facets, maybe even many personalities, the engineering mode, the silly mode, the charismatic mode, the visionary mode, but also the demon and dark mode.
A quote you cited about Elon really stood out to me. I forget who it's from, but inside the man, he's still there as a child, the child standing in front of his dad.
That was Tallulah, his second wife. And she's great. She's an English actress. They've been married twice, actually. And Tallulah said that's just him from his childhood. He's a drama addict. Kimball says that as well. And I asked why, and Tallulah said, for him, love and family are kind of associated with those psychological torments. And in many ways, he'll channel. I mean, Tallulah would be with him in 2008 when the company was going back, or whatever it may have been, or later. And he would be so stressed he would vomit. And then he would channel things that his father had said, use phrases his father had said to him. And so she told me, deep inside the man is this man-child still standing in front of his father.
To what degree is that true for many of us, do you think?
I think it's true, but in many different ways. I'll say something personal, which is I was blessed, and perhaps it's a bit of a downside too, with the fact that I had the greatest father you could ever imagine, and mother. They were the kindest people you'd ever want to meet. I grew up in a magical place in New Orleans. My dad was an engineer, an electrical engineer, and, he was always kind. Perhaps I'm not quite as driven or as crazed. I don't have to prove things. So I get to write about Elon Musk. I get to write about, Einstein or Steve Jobs or Leonardo da Vinci, who, as you know, was totally torn by demons and had different difficult childhood situations, not even legitimized by his father. So sometimes those of us who are lucky enough to have really gentle, sweet childhoods, we grow up with fewer demons, but we grow up with fewer drives, and we end up maybe being Boswell and not being Dr. Johnson. We end up being the observer, not being the doer. And so I always respect those who are in the arena. I don't,
You don't see yourself as a man in the arena.
I've had a gentle, sweet career, and I've got to cover really interesting people. But I've never shot off a rocket that might someday get to Mars. I've never moved us into the era of electric vehicles. I've never stayed up all night on the factory floor. I don't have quite those, either the drives or the addiction to risk. I mean, Elon's addicted to risk. He's addicted to adventure. Me, if I see something that's risky, I spend some time calculating, okay, upside, downside here. But that's another reason that people like Elon Musk get stuff done, and people like me write about the Elon Musks.
One other aspect of this, given a difficult childhood, whether it's Elon or Da Vinci, I wonder if there's some wisdom, some advice almost that you can draw, that you can give to people with difficult childhoods.
I think all of us have demons, even those of us who grew up in a magical part of New Orleans with sweet parents.
Yes.
And we all have demons. And rule one in life is harness your demons. Know that you're ambitious or not ambitious, or you're lazy or whatever. Leonardo da Vinci knew he was a procrastinator. I think it's useful to know what's eating at you, know how to harness it. Also know what you're good at. I'll take Musk as another example. I'm a little bit more like Kimball Musk than Elon. I maybe got over-endowed with the empathy gene. And what does that mean? Well, it means that I was okay when I ran Time Magazine. It was a group of about 150 people on the editorial floors, and I knew them all, and we had a jolly time. When I went to CNN, I was not very good at being a manager or an executive of an organization. I cared a little bit too much that people didn't get annoyed at me or mad at me. And Elon said that about John McNeil, for example, who was president of Tesla. It's in the book. I talked to John McNeil a long time, and he says, Elon just would fire people, be really rough on people. He didn't have the empathy for the people in front of him. And Elon says, yeah, that's right. And John McNeil couldn't fire people. He cared more about pleasing the people in front of him than pleasing the entire enterprise or getting things done. Being overendowed with a desire to please people can make you less tough of a manager. And that doesn't mean there aren't great people who are overendowed. Ben Franklin, overendowed with the desire to please people. The worst criticism of him from John Adams and others was that he was insinuating, which kind of meant he was always trying to get people to like him. But that turned out to be a good thing. When they can't figure out the big state, little state issue at the Constitutional Convention, when they can't figure out the Treaty of Paris, whatever it is, he brings people together, and that is his superpower. So to get back to the lessons you asked, and the first was harness your demons. The second is to know your strengths and your superpower.
Mm-hmm.
My superpower is definitely not being a tough manager. After running CNN for a while, I said, okay, I think I've proven I don't really enjoy this or know how to do this well. Do I have other talents? Yeah, I think I have the talent to observe people really closely, to write about it in a straight, but I hope interesting narrative style. That's a power. It's totally different from running an organization. It took me until 3 years of running CNN that I realized I'm not cut to be an executive in a really high intense situations. Elon Musk is cut to be an executive in highly intense situations, so much so that when things get less intense, when they actually are making enough cars and rockets are going up and landing, he thinks of something else so he can surge and have more intensity. He's addicted to intensity. And that's his superpower, which is a lot greater than the superpower of being a good observer.
But I think also to build on that, it's not just addiction to like risk and drama. There's always a big mission above it. So I would say it's an empathy towards people in the big picture.
It's an empathy towards humanity more than the empathy towards the 3 or 4 humans who might be sitting in the conference room with you. And that's a big deal. You see that in a lot of people. You see it, Bill Gates, Larry Summers, Elon Musk. They always have empathy for these great goals of humanity. And at times they can be clueless about the emotions of the people in front of them, or callous sometimes. Musk, as you said, is driven by mission more than any person I've ever seen. And it's not only mission, it's like cosmic missions, meaning he's got 3 really big missions. One is to make humans a spacefaring civilization, make us multiplanetary, or get us to Mars. Number 2 is to bring us into the era of sustainable energy, to bring us into the era of electric vehicles and solar roofs and battery packs. And third is to make sure that artificial intelligence is safe and is aligned with human values. And every now and then I'd talk to him and we'd be talking about Starlink satellites or whatever, or he would be pushing the people in front of him at SpaceX and saying, if you do this, we'll never get to Mars in our lifetime. And then he would give the lecture how important it was for human consciousness to get to Mars in our lifetime. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the pep talk of somebody trying to inspire a team, or maybe it's the type of pontification you do on a podcast. But on like the 20th time I watched him, I realized, okay, I believe it. He actually is driven by this.
He is frustrated and angry that because of this particular minor engineering decision, the big mission is not going to be accomplished. It's not a pep talk. It's a literal frustration.
An impatience, a frustration. And it's also just probably the most deeply ingrained thing in him is his mission. He joked at one point to me about how much he loved reading comics as a kid. And he said, all the people in the comic books, they're trying to save the world, but they're wearing their underpants on the outside and they look ridiculous. And then he paused and said, but they are trying to save the world. And whether it's Starlink in Ukraine or Starship going to Mars or trying to get a global new Tesla, I think he's got this epic sense of the role he's going to play in helping humanity on big things. And like the characters in the comic books, it's sometimes ridiculous, but it also is sometimes true.
When I was reading this part of the book, I was thinking of all the young people who are struggling in this way. And I think a lot of people are in different ways, whether they grow up without a father, whether they grow up with physical, emotional, mental abuse, or demons of any kind, as you talked about. And it's really painful to read, but also really damn inspiring. That
Thank
if you sort of walk side by side with those demons, if you don't let that pain break you, or somehow channel it, if you can put it this way, that you can do great things in this world.
Well, that's an epic view of why we write biography, which is more epic than I had even thought of. So I say thank you, because in some ways what you're trying to do is say, okay, I mean, Leonardo, you talk about being a misfit. He's born illegitimate in the village of Vinci, and he's gay, and he's left-handed, and he's distracted, and his father won't legitimize him. And then he wanders off to the town of Florence, and he becomes the greatest artist and engineer of the early Renaissance, of that part of the Renaissance. I hope this book inspires Jennifer Doudna, the gene editing pioneer who helps discover CRISPR, gene editing tool, which my book, The Code Breaker, she grew up feeling like a misfit, in Hawaii, in a Polynesian village, being the only white person, and also trying to live up to a father who pushed her. So if people can read the books, and I should have said about Jennifer Doudna, my point was that she was told by her school guidance counselor, no, girls don't do science. Science is not for girls. You're not going to do math or science. And so it pushes her to say, all right, I'm going to do math and science.
Just to interrupt real quick, but Jennifer Doudna, you've written an amazing book about her, Nobel Prize winner, CRISPR developer, just incredible, one of the great scientists in the 21st century.
Right. And I'm talking about when Jennifer Doudna was young and she felt really, really out of place. Like you and me and a lot of people when they feel in that way, they read books. They curl up with a book.
Mm-hmm.
So her father drops a book on her bed called The Double Helix, the book by James Watson on the discovery of the structure of DNA by him and Rosalind Franklin and Francis Crick. And she realizes, oh my God, girls can become scientists. My school guidance counselor is wrong. So I think books, like she read this book, and even if it's a comic books like Elon Musk read, books can sometimes inspire you. And every one of my books is about people who were totally innovative, who weren't just smart, because none of us are going to be able to match Einstein in mental processing power. But we can be as curious as he was and creative and think out of the box the way he did. Or Steve Jobs put it, think different. And so I hope with my books, I'm saying, this isn't a how-to guide, but this is somebody you can walk alongside.
Mm-hmm.
You can see Einstein growing up Jewish in Germany. You can see Jennifer Doudna growing up or as an outsider, or Leonardo da Vinci, or Elon Musk, in really violent South Africa with a psychologically difficult father and getting off the train when he goes to anti-apartheid concert with his brother. And there's a man with a knife sticking out of his head and they step into the pool of blood and it's sticky on their souls. This causes, scars that last the rest of your life. And the question is not how do you avoid getting scarred? It's, how do you deal with it?